They said you wouldn't make it. They were sure of it. They whispered it in hallways. They bet on your failure in silence. They smiled at you, while secretly measuring the size of your coffin. And yet, you're still here. What? You weren't supposed to survive that. That storm was designed to break you. That betrayal was supposed to poison you. That setback, oh, that was meant to finish the job. But look at you, breathing, standing, watching. You didn't just survive. You slayed another peon without even trying. And the funny thing, you didn't even notice when you leveled up. See, life keeps sending little villains your way. Doubt, rejection, mockery, failure. Tiny soldiers marching under the illusion they can conquer you. They swing their plastic swords. They shout their empty threats. They expect you to crumble. But you smile. Because somewhere along the way, pain stopped scaring you. Loss stopped defining you. Chaos became your playground. They thought you were fragile. They didn't realize you were forged. Every no sharpened you. Every fall trained you. Every lonely night built a mind they can't manipulate. And now it terrifies them, because you're unpredictable. You don't react the way they expect. You don't beg the way they planned. You don't break the way they hoped. You adapt, and that's the real punchline, isn't it? The world keeps underestimating you. And you keep surviving anyway. So tonight, when they look at you and think, how are they still standing? Let them wonder. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be the victim in this story. You're the plot twist. They expected you to break, not bend, not pause. Break completely? They calculated your limits based on who you used to be. They studied your past mistakes, your emotional reactions, your old fears, and decided that under enough pressure, you would shatter like glass. And honestly, for a moment, it looked like they were right. The weight was real. The pressure was intentional. The obstacles weren't random. They were designed. Designed to exhaust you. Designed to confuse you. Designed to make you doubt your own strength. But something strange happened. Instead of breaking, you adapted. At first, it didn't look powerful. It looked messy. You were tired. You questioned yourself. You felt the sting of betrayal, the silence of isolation, the humiliation of being underestimated. You didn't roar. You didn't fight dramatically. You observed. You learned. You adjusted. Quietly. That's what they didn't account for. They thought resilience meant resistance. They thought strength meant pushing back immediately. They didn't realize real power is flexible. Real power studies the battlefield before striking. Real power survives long enough to understand the pattern. So when they raised their voices, you lowered yours. When they tried to provoke you, you detached. When they expected you to collapse under pressure, you built endurance in the dark. You stopped reacting the way they predicted. You stopped playing the role they assigned you. And that shift, subtle, almost invisible, changed everything. Adaptation is dangerous because it's silent. A breaking person is loud. A complaining person is visible. But an adapting person, they are observing, calculating, rewiring. You began to see through manipulation. You recognized patterns in behavior. You understood that not every battle deserves your energy. Instead of defending your ego, you strengthened your mindset. Instead of proving them wrong immediately, you improved strategically. And here's the twist. Adaptation made you harder to attack. You became less emotional in chaos, more patient in conflict, sharper in decision-making. You learned when to speak and when to disappear, when to confront and when to let silence do the damage. Every attempt to corner you became training. Every criticism became information. Every setback became data. They wanted you overwhelmed. You became aware. They wanted you fragile. You became fluid. You stopped trying to win arguments and started winning internally. You detached from the need for validation. You understood that survival isn't about domination. It's about evolution. While they were busy trying to push you to your breaking point, you were busy expanding it. And that's what terrifies people the most. Because someone who breaks can be controlled. Someone who reacts can be predicted. But someone who adapts, they cannot be trapped twice the same way. They remember, they grow, they refine. You didn't survive by accident. You survived because you adjusted your mindset, your expectations, your boundaries. You learned to protect your energy. You learned to move differently. You learned that strength doesn't always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks calm, detached, patient. And the more they tested you, the more layers you built. Pressure didn't crush you. It conditioned you. Opposition didn't stop you. It trained you. Underestimation didn't weaken you. It disguised your growth. Now when challenges come, you don't panic. You analyze. You don't explode. You strategize. You don't crumble. You recalibrate. Because breaking would have been easier. Adapting required intelligence. And intelligence, sharpened by experience, becomes something far more powerful than force. Every attack was supposed to slow you down. That was the plan. A small insult here, a silent exclusion there, a missed opportunity, a whispered doubt. Nothing dramatic, just tiny hits over and over, like paper cuts meant to bleed you quietly. They weren't trying to destroy you in one blow. No, that would be too obvious. They sent peons, small problems, minor enemies, petty challenges, annoyances dressed as obstacles. And at first you treated them like threats. You overthought the criticism. You replayed the rejection. You felt the sting of disrespect. Each small attack felt personal. Each setback felt heavier than it should have. You wondered why the world kept throwing such irritating, unnecessary battles your way. Why couldn't things just be smooth? Why did every step forward come with some small resistance? But here's what changed. You grew, and suddenly, those attacks started looking smaller. The insult that once ruined your day became background noise. The rejection that once crushed your confidence became redirection. The gossip that once disturbed your peace became irrelevant chatter. The same problems showed up, but they didn't hit the same way anymore. Because you weren't the same anymore. What used to feel like a boss fight revealed itself as a peon. A minor character in your story. A temporary distraction. You realized something powerful. Not every attack is proof of your weakness. Sometimes it's proof of your progress. When you level up, resistance follows. Not because you're failing, but because you're advancing. Think about it. The higher you rise, the more visible you become. And visibility attracts friction. People test what they don't understand. They challenge what they secretly feel threatened by. They poke at confidence to see if it's real. They throw subtle attacks hoping to expose cracks. But you didn't crack. You adapted. And in adapting, you outgrew the battlefield. The same negativity that once consumed your thoughts now barely earns your attention. The same manipulative tactics that once confused you now look obvious. The same small enemies who once felt intimidating now seem small. That's growth. You didn't need to fight harder. You didn't need to shout louder. You simply evolved. And evolution changes perspective. What used to tower over you now barely reaches your shoulders. What used to intimidate you now amuses you. What used to drain you now teaches you. You stopped reacting emotionally to every little challenge. You stopped treating minor opposition like a catastrophe. You realized that most attacks are not personal. They're projections. Most criticism isn't about you. It's about their insecurity. Most resistance isn't a wall. It's a test. And tests become easier when you've already passed harder ones. The real transformation wasn't external. It was internal. Your tolerance increased. Your emotional control strengthened. Your standards rose. You stopped seeing every problem as an emergency. You began categorizing, prioritizing, strategizing. You learned that not every enemy deserves your sword. Some deserve your silence. Some deserve your indifference. Some deserve nothing at all. And that's when the power dynamic shifted. Because peons only feel powerful when you treat them like bosses. When you stress. When you react. When you prove they got under your skin. But when you smile. When you stay calm. When you keep moving forward unaffected. They lose relevance. The attack fails. You didn't slay them with force. You outgrew them with maturity. And the most dangerous part, you did it without even trying. Not because you became ruthless, but because you became aware. Aware of your value. Aware of your progress. Aware that your energy is too expensive to waste on small battles. Now, when a minor setback appears, you don't see disaster. You see data. When someone throws shade, you don't see threat. You see insecurity. When a door closes, you don't see rejection. You see filtering. Every small attack that once felt heavy now feels light. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. The peons didn't shrink, you expanded. Survival isn't luck. It just looks like luck to people who weren't there when you were fighting battles in silence. From the outside, it seems accidental. Wow, you're still standing. You're so lucky that worked out. Things always fall into place for you. They see the outcome. They don't see the evolution. They don't see the nights you stayed awake replaying conversations in your head, analyzing where you went wrong. They don't see the discipline it took to stay quiet when you wanted to explode. They don't see the restraint, the recalibration, the internal rebuilding. Survival wasn't a coin toss. It was a series of decisions made under pressure. Luck doesn't wake up early to improve. Luck doesn't swallow pride to learn. Luck doesn't sit alone and confront its own weaknesses. You did. At first, surviving felt like barely holding on. You were reacting, defending, trying not to drown in everything happening around you. But slowly, something shifted. You stopped just trying to get through it. You started asking questions. What is this teaching me? Where am I vulnerable? Why does this trigger me? How can I respond differently next time? That's evolution. It's subtle. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic music playing in the background. Just small upgrades happening internally. A little more patience. A little less emotional chaos. A little more awareness. A little less ego. While others blamed circumstances, you studied them. While others complained about unfairness, you built adaptability. While others waited for rescue, you built endurance. That's not luck. That's refinement. Survival becomes powerful when it's conscious. When you stop seeing yourself as a victim of events and start seeing yourself as a student of them. Every failure becomes feedback. Every betrayal becomes clarity. Every loss becomes instruction. You didn't just survive the storm. You learned how storms form. And once you understand patterns, you stop being surprised by them. You began to recognize red flags earlier. You began to protect your energy more intentionally. You began to choose your reactions instead of being controlled by them. The same situations that once knocked you down now meet a different version of you. Calmer, sharper, less naive. That's evolution in motion. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's internal restructuring. You rebuilt your mindset. You strengthened your emotional regulation. You raised your standards quietly. You started moving differently, speaking less, observing more, reacting slower. People call it luck because they don't see the work. They don't see the discipline of not repeating the same mistake twice. They don't see the humility it takes to admit when you were wrong. They don't see the courage it takes to walk away from what's comfortable but toxic. They don't see the self-control required to choose growth over revenge. Survival becomes transformation when you evolve faster than the challenges trying to break you. And that's exactly what happened. You didn't just escape situations. You upgraded because of them. You didn't just endure pain. You extracted wisdom from it. You didn't just outlast opposition. You adapted your strategy, your mindset, your boundaries. Now when pressure hits, you don't panic the way you used to. You assess. When conflict appears, you don't react impulsively. You analyze. When uncertainty creeps in, you don't crumble. You adjust. That adjustment is evolution. You are not the same person who entered the storm. You carry different standards, different awareness, different strength. Your tolerance for nonsense is lower. Your confidence in your resilience is higher. Your ability to detach from chaos is sharper. People may still call it luck. Let them. Because they weren't there when you chose growth over comfort. They weren't there when you rewired your habits. They weren't there when you faced your own flaws and corrected them. They see survival as a random outcome. You know it was a calculated evolution. The underestimated always become the unpredictable. That's the part no one sees coming. When people label you as not enough, they relax around you. They stop studying you. They stop preparing for you. They assume they've already figured you out. And in that assumption, they lower their guard. Underestimation is a disguise. When they think you're harmless, they speak freely. When they think you're incapable, they reveal their strategies. When they think you're weak, they expose their arrogance. They build their confidence on the belief that you will stay small, stay quiet, stay manageable. But growth doesn't ask for permission. While they're busy overlooking you, you're observing everything. You're noticing patterns in behavior. You're studying reactions. You're analyzing weaknesses, theirs and yours. You're improving quietly, without announcing every step. Because when no one expects much from you, you gain the rarest advantage of freedom to evolve without pressure. Underestimated people move differently. They don't feel the need to perform constantly. They don't feel obligated to prove themselves every second. They operate in the background, refining skills, sharpening instincts, building resilience. No spotlight, no applause, just progress. And progress in silence is dangerous, because when the moment finally comes, when the opportunity appears, when the challenge escalates, when the stage suddenly shifts, you don't respond the way they predicted. You don't hesitate the way they expected. You don't shrink the way they planned. You move decisively. That's when confusion hits them. Since when did they become this confident? Since when did they think like that? Since when did they get this sharp? They missed the transformation because they weren't paying attention. They were too comfortable in their assumptions. They believed their first impression was permanent. They forgot that people evolve. Unpredictability isn't chaos. It's controlled growth that no one tracked. When you've been underestimated long enough, you develop an edge. You learn how to listen more than you speak. You learn how to watch without revealing your intentions. You learn how to calculate risk quietly. You become less reactive, more strategic. And strategy always beats arrogance. Those who overestimate themselves make noise. Those who underestimate you make mistakes. But those who grow in silence, they strike with precision. It's not about revenge. It's about timing. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. You let your results speak when it matters most. You don't waste energy correcting every wrong opinion. You let them believe what they want. Because their belief shapes their behavior. And their behavior creates openings. The underestimated adapt faster because they've had to. They've had to work harder to be seen. They've had to learn skills instead of relying on reputation. They've had to build confidence internally because validation wasn't guaranteed. That internal confidence becomes unpredictable because it's not dependent on external approval. You don't need permission to act. You don't need applause to move. You don't need consensus to decide. So when the pressure rises, you don't crumble under expectations. You thrive in surprise. People expect patterns from you based on your past. They expect hesitation because you once hesitated. They expect doubt because you once doubted. They expect limits because you once had them. But they don't realize you outgrew those versions. And growth changes patterns. Now your calm looks intimidating. Your silence looks strategic. Your patience looks calculated. You don't react to provocation. You don't reveal your full capability. You don't show every card in your hand. That mystery creates power. Because when they finally recognize your evolution, it's too late to adjust their strategy. They built their approach around an outdated version of you. And outdated information leads to defeat. Being underestimated isn't an insult. It's leverage. It gives you space to improve without scrutiny. It gives you room to fail privately and learn quietly. It gives you the element of surprise. And surprise is powerful in any arena. When they finally look at you and realize you're not who they thought you were, the shock isn't in your strength. It's in how completely they misjudged you. You weren't supposed to win. That was the silent agreement. The unspoken prediction. The quiet conclusion people reached when they looked at your circumstances, your background, your past mistakes. They measured your resources. They evaluated your support system. They calculated your odds. And somewhere in their minds, they decided the outcome, not you. They thought they knew how this story would end. Maybe you didn't have the connections. Maybe you didn't have the loud confidence. Maybe you didn't fit the image of someone who dominates the room. Maybe you stumbled publicly once. Maybe you failed in a way that people don't forget easily. And once people see you fall, they build a permanent image of you lying there. They didn't expect you to stand up differently. Because the first time you chased success, you were naive. The first time you trusted, you were open. The first time you tried, you were unpolished. They judged you based on version 1. But you kept upgrading. You weren't supposed to win because the system favors the predictable. It favors the loud, the already validated, the already proven. It doesn't usually bet on the quiet rebuild. It doesn't expect the comeback from someone who walked away silently to improve. While they were celebrating early victories, you were studying your losses. While they were confident in their head start, you were building endurance. While they assumed you had reached your limit, you were expanding it. That's why your win feels disruptive. It challenges the narrative they created about you. It forces them to reconsider their judgment. It exposes how quickly people lock others into boxes. When you succeed unexpectedly, it doesn't just elevate you, it unsettles them. Because if you can win after being overlooked, misjudged, or underestimated, then their perception was flawed. And people don't like confronting that. You weren't supposed to win because winning requires transformation. It requires shedding the version of yourself that once hesitated. It requires discipline when motivation fades. It requires consistency when applause is absent. It requires belief when evidence is thin. Most people stop at discomfort. You didn't. There were moments you wanted to quit. Moments you questioned if they were right about you. Moments where doubt was louder than confidence. But instead of surrendering to those voices, you listened to them carefully. You identified the weak spots. You strengthened them. You turned insecurity into skill development. That's not dramatic. That's deliberate. You weren't supposed to win because your progress was invisible. It didn't look glamorous. It looked like routine. It looked like repetition. It looked like discipline. And discipline doesn't trend. It compounds. Every small improvement stacked quietly. Every mistake corrected sharpened you. Every rejection refined your approach. By the time the opportunity came back around, you were no longer the same competitor. You were prepared. And preparation meeting opportunity looks like luck to observers. They didn't see the mornings you showed up when no one cared. They didn't see the times you chose growth over ego. They didn't see the uncomfortable self-reflection. They only saw the final result, the moment you stepped forward with confidence they didn't recognize. That's why it shocked them. You weren't supposed to win because they underestimated your capacity to change. They assumed your past defined your ceiling. They assumed your setbacks were permanent. They assumed your quietness meant weakness. But quiet growth is still growth. And transformation doesn't ask for approval. Now, when you stand in your success, it doesn't feel loud. It feels earned. It feels steady. It feels grounded because you know how many versions of yourself you had to outgrow to reach this point. They see an unexpected victory. You see a calculated evolution that finally surfaced,